Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming today. This isn't a part of our normal Global Perspective series, but it is a special forum that we decided to have because we have we're very privileged to have with us today Vice-Admiral Mark Fox. Admiral Fox is the commander of the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command and Combined Maritime Forces, sometimes referred to as the Fifth Fleet. Whether that's accurate or inaccurate, I'm not quite sure. Admiral Fox has spent a considerable portion of his career here in this region. Since 1990, this is his fourth command in the region. He was the commander of the Strike Force Squadron 81 on the USS Enterprise, commanded the Carrier Wing 2 on the USS Constellation, and the Carrier Strike Group 10 aboard the USS Harry S. Truman. He also spent time in Iraq with the multinational forces. And most impressively, at least to me, is he's made over 1,300 career landings on an aircraft carrier. I don't know if any of you have actually been on an aircraft carrier to see what, just how small they actually are in terms of landing a plane. I just find it quite impressive. We are going to have Admiral talk for about 30 minutes on the record, and then we'll have about a 30-minute question and answer period. With that, I would like to introduce Vice-Admiral Fox.
Actually, the 1,300 carrier landings were the easy part here. Now I have to really work for a living. Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. Here's the clicker. Let's see if it works. So just to clarify just a little bit, I actually wear three hats. General Mattis is the Central Command Commander in Tampa. He's my boss, and I'm the naval component for General Mattis. So I'm NAV sent. He's the Central Command Commander, and then I have counterparts. I have an Air Force brother that's over in Qatar, in Al Udeid, and then an Army brother up in Kuwait, and then a Marine Corps brother. So there are different components for General Mattis. And then I'm also Fifth Fleet, so it's unusual to have the component and the fleet command in the same spot. And I'm also commander of the Combined Maritime Forces, which are the three logos that are on the slide. I'm going to jump right into this. The modern world is so interconnected. The world is connected in ways that most of us don't even appreciate or think about. The movement of goods and services around the globe are what make the global economy work. 90% of everything that moves on the planet moves on water. And every single one of us is affected by and benefit from this movement of goods and services that flow around the globe. And so I just want to depict here, you can see the relative size of the bubble. It doesn't show up very well, does it? I'll walk here. The relative size of the bubble will indicate the volume of the trade and the kind of flow through there. Because the world is so interconnected, we all take this for granted. And as a matter of fact, I compare it to oxygen. Nobody thinks about the breath that they're about to draw because there's always oxygen there. And as soon as you discover that you're having a hard time breathing, then that's all you think about. Well, I would also submit to you that that is the way that the world economy is today, and we are all affected by the maritime domain. To come a little bit closer to home, on this map, this is a depiction. We have what is referred to as automatic information systems. Each green dot represents a ship of over 300 tons. And just like airplanes have what we refer to as transponders, and they have a code that you can tell which airplane is which, these are AIS, Automatic Information System, dots that show just a given snapshot of ships throughout the region. And of course, there are three very key choke points I'll talk more about, of course, the Suez Canal, Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, and the Strait of Hormuz. And through these straits pass, well, for example, in the Gulf of Aden, approximately 23,000 ships per year pass through the Gulf of Aden. Every single day through the Strait of Hormuz passes approximately 17 to 18 million barrels of oil. If you recall from the recent unrest that occurred in Libya produces about 3% of the world's oil. I'll go into more detail about how much oil comes from this region, but the entire global economy is dependent on the energy that comes from this region and also the free access to what we would refer to as the global commons, access to the ocean. So I'll focus in just a little bit. The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz also happens to be the site of a recent terrorist attack, it was last year, of the motor vessel M-Star. And we assess this to have been an unsuccessful suicide attack against this tanker. And if you look at the history of terrorist organizations, they have made a point of wanting to have spectacular attacks against energy and against Western symbols of Western industrial type of might. And so these large super tankers, in this case the M-Star, carrying 2 million barrels of oil outbound the Strait of Hormuz on July 28th of 2010. It was a Japanese-owned Marshall-flagged vessel, and they reported an explosion on their aft starboard quarter back here. So this is the bridge of the ship, and then this is the right part of the aft part of the ship here. And only one crew member was injured. There were no fatalities, and the ship remained seaworthy and was able to complete its mission to take oil to Japan. The Bab el-Mandeb, or the Gateway of Tears, sees slightly less oil, but the entrance for all shipping that's going into the Suez Canal. There is a pipeline that goes across the Saudi Peninsula that can carry approximately 5 million barrels of oil per day, but it is already probably about half in capacity, so the margin for additional oil transport across the Saudi Peninsula is actually relatively limited. But the importance of this choke point with regard to oil is a given, but also an incident in the Bab el-Mandeb could stop the transfer of Chinese-built iPods going to Europe or a bottle of perfume reaching Japan from Europe. And it's not just about energy supplies. In today's world, warehouses are a waste of valuable real estate. Why have a warehouse when you can build a mall? And so the way that the global economy has leaned itself out, the global container ship fleet is increasingly the warehouse as well, with the idea of just enough, just-in-time supply logistics that ensures that stock levels are at a minimum and do not buy up unwanted capital investment. An example of this, when the motor vessel Napoli ran aground after losing power in a storm off the UK in 2007, she was carrying a myriad of goods ranging from BMW gearboxes and motorcycles, but also the London supermarket stock of diapers. And by the time the next container ship arrived, London was down to 1 day's supply. So as we look at the extraordinary growth in maritime trade since 1970, and back in 1970 were the days when a ship was registered, crewed, and owned by one country that had singular interests in that, and the cargo was going to and from that country. Today, the vast majority of trade around the world is interconnected and very interdependent. So who owns the ships today? On the left column is where the ships are registered, and the right shows who owns them. But of course, this doesn't show who owns or has interest in the cargo. For example, a Panamanian registered Greek-owned very large container ship may be of strategic interest to the United States. As I mentioned before, terrorist organizations have made a clear and unambiguous, have articulated a clear threat that they wish to disrupt Western trade. This is an example. In 2002, the motor vessel Limburg was attacked by terrorist waterborne improvised explosive device off the Yemeni coast. These attacks not only terrorize the crew, but they bring environmental disaster and threaten economic instability once they threaten global confidence in maritime trade reaching its destination, where again, just enough, just in time is considered the normal order of the day. Or for the U.S. Navy, we suffered an attack on USS Cole in the port of Aden back in October of 2000. It was again an Al-Qaeda inspired attack. Al-Qaeda also attacked the oil platforms off of Iraq back in 2004. They did not successfully damage the infrastructure. They did wind up exploding a suicide boat that killed 2 American sailors and a Coast Guardsman that intercepted this, and they did not successfully damage the oil platforms. It's not just in the Middle East either, though. On the night of 27th of February, 2004, a 10,000-ton ferry sailed out of Manila, Philippines, with 900 passengers and crew on board. A television set with a 3.6 kilogram bomb, that's 8 pounds for Americans in the crowd, had been placed on board in the lower crowded decks. And when this exploded, the explosion tore through the lower part of the vessel, and it started a fire that engulfed the ship. It caused the confirmed death of 63 people. Another 53 were recorded as missing and presumed dead. And as the fire spread across the vessel, most of the survivors jumped into the sea or boarded rescue boats. And by the 29th of February, officials had accounted for 565 of the 744 recorded passengers, all but 2 of the 155 crew members. Back in this part of the world again, these threats are real as well. Piracy is a lucrative business model if you come from a failed state. To give you an example of the expanding reach and nature of pirate activity, you can see in the green circles, those are the areas in which pirate activity occurred, and you can see how it's progressively expanded further and further out. Now, one of the things that we, the West, have done, let me show you another example of the same kind of data. The green are disrupted attacks, the yellow is attempted, and then the red are successful pirate events. So one of the things that we, the West, have done, and NATO, EU, and then a coalition of many different nations have come together working here in the combined maritime forces here in this region to deal with the threat of piracy, and we're working together. So first of all, what we did is there is a contact group at the United Nations that has created some opportunity for us to work together to deal with piracy. And then here in Bahrain, once every quarter now, we have the Shared Awareness and Deconfliction meeting, we call it SHADE, in which nations, we've had 150 delegates from 50 different nations coming together, and some very wide-ranging opportunities for us to cooperate together. The problem, there's a number of issues here with piracy. First of all, the conditions ashore in Somalia are the root cause of piracy. And I have no way in my military role to influence conditions ashore in Somalia. And then you have the maritime industry, and they are responsible for best management practices. You know, the pirates are like wolves that will go after the slow, the weak, the unwitting. So the ships that do not pay attention or not that don't go at the appropriate speeds or conform to these best management practices are the ones that are most vulnerable to pirate attacks. And of course, there's the military piece, which I'm describing here, but then finally there's the legal finish piece. And one of the problems that we deal with is there is a less than satisfactory international set of handles to grasp this problem. Because when we capture pirates in the act, if they are not, the way American law is written, if they're not going against a U.S. flagged, or U.S. owned, or U.S. citizens, then we, in fact, we don't have a legal path to take them forward. And there are a number of places we've taken suspected pirates to Kenya, we've taken them to Seychelles, some of them have gone to Japan, some have gone to Europe, about 25, 30 of them have come back to the United States. But the legal finish for the pirate problem is unsatisfactory because we don't have an internationally accepted standard way of handling this thing. And so if or when we capture these pirates and they don't meet the criteria for us to keep them, we wind up putting them back and send them back into Somalia. It's not satisfying, but it's there is a seam, and I would refer to this, the pirates are using lawfare. It's a means of a very lucrative business model, and they understand that they're beneath the radar, if you will, for international standards. So for the Americans in the crowd, this gives you an idea of the distance that we're talking about. Today, as we speak, there are 23 warships from 13 different nations that are supplying ships to help patrol. We're getting maritime patrol aircraft from a variety of different nations. And between NATO, EU, and CTF 151, which is my organization, let me go back for just a minute and talk a little bit more about the organizations that I'm responsible for. CTF 151 is the task force that is responsible for doing the counter-piracy mission. CTF 150 is a maritime security organization that's focused on counter-terror and also smuggling and arms smuggling and that sort of thing. Now, one of the reasons that you may ask, well, why do you have one organization that's focused on counter-piracy and you have another one that's focused on counter-terror? And it's because of the way that some nations will be willing to sign up to participate. Some nations want to do a specifically narrowly focused counter-terror operation, and others want to do counter-piracy. So these two organizations, 150 and 151, cooperate and work together, but they have different focus of their operations, which allows us to create an umbrella that's large enough to have international partners to come in. And then finally, CTF 152 is the organization that's focused on maritime security inside the Gulf. I'm pleased to say that it has a very regional face. Our partners here in this region, it's currently commanded by Kuwait. It had just been commanded by the Emirates, and before that it was Bahrain. Bahrain was a leader in taking command of CTF 152. And so this is a really encouraging thing to see partners in the region working together to create a common operating picture and find ways to actually have watchstanders who understand the operation that's part of a larger effort than just their own individual Navy. And it has been a beneficial thing. It's been very good to watch these local partner nations grow professionally with their officers learning standard operating procedures and being part of a much larger organization than they would otherwise have an opportunity to do so. So in addition to NATO and EU and CTF 151, in terms of focusing on the counter-piracy mission, we also have independent deployers. So that includes Russia and China. as contributing ships to this effort to counter the pirate activity. So one of the things that we did, this is, actually I should probably use this. This shows up. So here is the Gulf of Aden. 23,000 ships passing through here, and you can see from the geography of Somalia and Yemen that the geography favors pirate activity, and this is also sheltered, relatively speaking. We're just finishing up an environmental season that we refer to as the southwest monsoon. And the southwest monsoon is basically some very strong winds and waves that are coming up from this part. And during the summertime, from June until about now, we've been seeing winds of 25 to 30 knots and some very high seas of 15, 18 feet. So it's not conducive for small boat activity and the kind of pirate activity, although there's a lee right here, so typically the Gulf of Aden is more sheltered. So we saw early on the pirate activity beginning to occur here and close to the coast. And so what we did is we came up with what we refer to as the internationally recommended transit corridor. And so you can see there are a number of the PLAN, that's the People's Liberation Army Navy. So these are Chinese, this is a Chinese vessel, this is Russian, this is CTF 151, this is 465, which is the EU task force, and then there's also a NATO task force. And what we've done is we've divided up the patrol responsibilities here in the Gulf of Aden. So the early successes that the pirates had was generally in the Gulf of Aden. And so we've adapted, and the Gulf of Aden now is one of the safer places to operate a ship now because we're patrolling it well. Doesn't mean that there are not pirate attacks or that they're not attempting, because they do. And in fact, what we're seeing is as the southwest monsoon is dying down, we're actually having cases of some of these skiffs and dhows coming out from the coast, and we're anticipating an uptick as the environmental conditions in the Indian Ocean and Somali Basin improve. I think we're going to be dealing with an uptick in pirate activity. It's a problem that we can blunt, I think, but I don't think we can eliminate it until we find a way that the rule of law and a Coast Guard for Somalia occurs, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. One incident that's worth talking about here, it was a year ago, September, it's just a little over a year ago, and this is the IRTC, this internationally recommended transit corridor, and the motor vessel Magellan Star was boarded by pirates. The crew went into Citadel. They went into a strong room and cut the engines, and so the ship was drifting dead in the water. This was an instance where, just through pure coincidence, we had the right people, the right training, the right ship at the right place at the right time. And so there were Marines from USS Dubuque, which is this ship right here. There was the Turkish frigate Gökçeada was also one of the first ones on scene. The commander of CTF 151 at the time was a Turkish admiral. And so Dubuque and Gökçeada was also another one of our cruisers that were nearby. And we ultimately wound up doing what we refer to as an opposed boarding, a level 4 boarding. The Marines climbed up and took the ship back without firing a shot, I'm happy to say. Now the reason, normally we would have used helicopters for this. The helicopter that you see here is from the Turkish frigate. But we would normally have used helicopters for this operation, but our helicopters happened to be at Pakistan at the time, helping Pakistan deal with the flood disaster that they were dealing with. So we did a bottom-up boarding. We were able to take the ship back without a shot, and the crew of the Magellan Star didn't believe it. They're down in their Citadel, and so they're hearing Marines, as it turns out, knocking on the door saying, "Hey, it's okay, we're here," and they wouldn't come out. And so they finally cut a hole in the bulkhead, and this burly Marine took his flag off of his, uniform and stuck it through the hole. He says, "We're here to help you." So here's a good example of international cooperation. There was an incident in which, again, there was a vessel in the IRTC that was operating. The motor vessel Adnet was attacked by pirates. A Japanese P-3 patrol aircraft had passed the information to a Japanese ship, who in turn turned to a NATO ship, and then this is U.S. warship from CTF-151 that at the time was under the command of a New Zealander. And this is a perfect example of this new world that I'm talking about, where the number of people pirates are enemies of all. And there is no one in civilized world that thinks that pirate activity is appropriate or good. And so the reason that we have navies is to look out for our national interests around the world. And here is an example of a number of different countries who have chosen to come together freely. The CTF-151, all of the CTFs that work for me, we never impose any requirements in terms of a nation having to go further than its national authorities will allow. And so we're not bound by a treaty, and we don't have an overarching political framework that basically says you have to. So you bring what you can, and you contribute to the mission, and wherever your national authorities will allow you to go is how we will use you. Now, we will tailor the activities of some of the ships that are working for us to take advantage of national rules of engagement, so we can take advantage of each strength and each ability to do certain tasks. So we will never ask somebody to do something that we know is against their rules of engagement. It's not all piracy. People talk about the interactions that I'm now speaking from a U.S. perspective, the interactions that we have with Iran. And I'd like to share a story here with you about something that happened back, it was a little over a year ago now, it was in 19 August. One night, there was a young Hornet pilot that was flying a mission off of USS Harry S. Truman. Our carrier supporting our efforts in Afghanistan operates south of Pakistan here. So in this case, it was USS Harry S. Truman. Today, it's USS George H.W. Bush who's operating in this vicinity, and we fly sorties, close air support sorties into Afghanistan with no tail ashore, with no ordnance, with no fuel, with no parts, with no supply. So it's a completely and totally, it reduces the number of people that we have to have on the ground in Afghanistan. It also reduces the amount of fuel and supplies that we have to put in Afghanistan. These are long missions, but it gives us a good opportunity to support our ground effort in a landlocked nation from the flight deck of a carrier. Well, anyway, Harry S. Truman was operating here, and a young Hornet pilot was out on a routine training flight, if you want to call flying off of a ship at night routine. But he saw this dhow ablaze about 60 miles north of the carrier. So he called back to the ship and he said, "Hey, there's a ship burning down here. I think you probably ought to send a couple of helicopters up to help these guys out." So we launched a couple of helicopters, and we picked up 8 Iranian fishermen from a dhow that had been burning and ultimately sank. So it was during Ramadan, if you recall, in August of last year. So these guys were happy to have an opportunity to freshen up and get some food. And they were very glad to spend the night on an aircraft carrier. So the next day, an Iranian patrol plane came out. And the Iranian patrol plane contacted Harry S. Truman and said, "Hey, I'm looking for some fishermen. Have you seen them?" And so the crew of Harry S. Truman said, "Yes, we've seen them. As a matter of fact, we've got them on board." And so the Iranian patrol plane came back and said, "Well, can we send a helicopter out to pick them up?" Well, this was interesting. So I'm getting this feedback in real time from the strike group commander on Harry S. Truman. So this was my first opportunity to call my new boss, General Mattis, at about 4 in the morning his time. and say, boss, here's what we've got. I recommend that we authorize, if the Iranians want to come out with a helicopter and pick up their fishermen, that's fine with me. I know I went through flight training back in the 70s with Iranian officers before they were in their current organization. And they fly H-6 or H-3 helicopters, which we in the U.S. Navy flew for almost 50 years. We know how to chalk and chain and recover an H-3 helicopter. So I recommend that we say yes. And so General Mattis considered this for just a bit. He says, okay, let's do it. So we told the Iranian patrol plane, yep, you can launch a helicopter and come out and pick up your fishermen. And we were delighted to have this option. As it turns out, we called it a bluff. The one restriction I put onto it was I didn't want a night landing. So this needed to be during daylight hours for the helicopter to come out. So they didn't come out, but they spent a second night on the carrier. But the next day, the Iranians sent out this auxiliary and came out and went bridge to bridge with Harry S. Truman, and we put the fishermen into this rib and took them over there. And here's right down there, you can see the rib taking the 8 Iranian fishermen back to the Iranian vessel. The reason I tell you this story, number one, is there's this sense that everything is always on needles and pens, and that we're always, we are not attempting to pressurize this situation over here. And as a matter of fact, the things that we're focused on is the maritime security, to make sure that the free flow of oil and goods and services go in and out of the Gulf unimpeded. And all people that agree that civilized world benefits when we have free flow of goods and services around the globe can find ways to, to cooperate together. So anyway, it was an interesting, we interact with Iran on a frequent basis. Our airplanes are hailed or queried, our ships are. We talk to each other. Sailors have a unique advantage over other services because the medium in which we operate it lends itself to talking to other ships and applying standards of international standards of navigation and rules of the road. So sailors have a bit of an advantage in terms of having a chance to interact. We do it professionally and frequently, as a matter of fact. So with that, I'd like to conclude by saying we can surge troops and we can surge equipment, but the one thing you cannot surge is trust and friendship. And it's really important for us here to have an opportunity to interact and befriend and have a working relationship with all of the partners here that are like-minded, people who are interested in the free flow of goods and services around the globe, the people who are interested in maintaining stability in this region, and the people that are interested in taking advantage of all the amazing things that this 21st century world has given us in terms of communications and energy and that sort of thing. So you can't surge trust. You have to be here. Virtual presence is actual absence. And so we're actually here. We're interested in maintaining a very strong posture of support and friendship with our friends and partners here in this region. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have. And what I think I'll do is I'm going to ask anyone who has a question to raise your hand, and if you'll raise your hand, and then I'll take your question, and that way I can make sure I can cover as many of you all as you can. I'm going to take a number of your questions, and then I'll answer them in a little bit of a, so if you got a question, raise your hand, and then I'll jot it down and answer it.
Hello, yes. Okay. Well, it was very informative, Vice-Admiral Fox. It was very, very interesting. I have two questions. One, I wonder how small boat was some of these pirates that you can see there, what are they wearing? They can hijack a very big ships. And the second question is, wouldn't it be cheaper and easier to deal with them on land, with their governments, for instance, in Somalia, to see why they are going for this type of work and endangering their life? And wouldn't it be cheaper and easier to deal on land than on the sea? Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
It's Mansour Al-Jamri from Al-Wasat newspaper. Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. One question is about sharing the burden, the cost of all these operations. As you are serving in many ways private companies and sometimes national governments, who is paying what for all these efforts? Number two, there was something in the news about a request from top U.S. military command to have a hotline with the Iranians, which seemingly had been turned down. Is it as we read it, or something behind that request? Does it come into what you were talking about? Basically, you have regular, necessary communication as sailors. And thirdly, the counter-terror task force. Do you expect Iraq to be joining you when they assume their authority on the military in the coming year? Thank you.
That last question was, do I anticipate Iraq to join? Yeah, okay. Thank you for your questions. And if there are others, sir.
Ali Al Khalifa, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We heard in the news that pirates in Kenya attempted to kidnap a French woman. This shows that the task force is doing its job at sea, and the pirates are driven to these new desperate measures. How will the task force deal with this new threat?
Okay.
Okay.
Is it?
Yes, my name is Omar Fahoum. I'm with Deloitte. My question is on the Strait of Hormuz. You mentioned how strategic it is. The Iranians keep making threats about shutting it down if they're pressured. Do you have sufficient measures, and how credible is that threat?
I'm jotting this down so I can remember it. Yes, sir.
My name is Mahmoud Rafiq. I'm editor of 24/7 News. I also write for Arab News, Saudi Arabia. I have two brief questions. One is about the missing funds, cash from in Iraq, from the reconstruction funds, about 6.6 billion. How that big amount, which is seen as the biggest theft in the national history of U.S., can happen when there's so many people are around on the ground and they are implementing the reconstruction or other activities in any country. And my second question is about what we have just seen, the recent debate and friction between Pakistan and India, US, about Haqqani Group. Can you just shed some light on it? Who are they, and how they can cause a harm to the relationship between the two countries?
Okay, I think I've got a good sheet of questions here that I'll now have a chance to run down. First of all, how can pirates in small skiffs pirate a large vessel? And they use ladders, and grappling hooks, and just swing themselves up and pull themselves up. The best management practices that the industry has created: ships with high freeboard that make it hard to climb, high speed, observation of these best management practices of checking in and staying in close contact with the patrol aircraft. But the pirates are extremely resourceful. And in fact, if you remember the long distances that they went out over 1,300 nautical miles away from the coast of Somalia. And what they did is they took the motherships, they took ships that they had pirated, and then they would steam them out to sea with the crew, the pirated crew, and take them way out to sea with 60 or 70 young Somali men on board with skiffs, and then start their operation 1,000 miles from shore. And so I mentioned to you the distances that are involved. 2,000 nautical miles is a vast distance, and I've got somewhere on the order of 25 ships and probably half a dozen patrol planes to deal with that. So they have adapted. We have successfully protected the shipping that goes through the Gulf of Aden, but they have gone where we are not. And the use of motherships last year, as I mentioned, there are 10, I didn't mention actually, I should have. There are 10 ships that are currently being held with a total number of 250 50 approximately commercial sailors that are being held hostage right now. By January of this year, so I'm expecting this to increase, there were 32 ships that were captured and over 700 sailors being held hostage. So it goes in kind of cycles, and the pirates have been selling, getting the ransoms paid, and they're clearing out their anchorages so they can have another season of going out to do that. The second part of your question is, isn't it cheaper and easier to deal with this on land? I think so, but that's not my world as a sailor. As I began my responsibilities at the surf zone, and I would dearly love to see the rule of law and an effective Somali government and a Coast Guard that was effective to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But I don't see that as realistic in the foreseeable future. So it's just a fact of the matter, and we deal with the issue as we get it. So the next question was, who's paying what? The sharing piece of this. How much is this costing? We operate our ships. It's anyone who chooses to participate in this. It takes a naval capability to be able to conduct these kinds of operations. And one of the debates has been how much. People have asked me, how many ships do you need? How many aircraft do I need? And quite frankly, it's an economy of force effort, I'll be honest with you. It is not the highest priority mission that I conduct, because we're in the process now of drawing down our troop levels in Iraq. We're focused our operations in Afghanistan. There are a number of missions that are much higher in the priority, but at the same time, this is a mission that is important enough for us to contribute and provide the resources that we have. And what I'm trying to do is find, it's the 7th grade math problem of the Venn diagram of how many people have interests that overlap. And here are national interests from different nations, and you lay them all on top of each other, and all of us can agree that the free flow of energy and goods and services around the globe is something that's worth pursuing and doing. So it's the taxpayers of the respective nations who provide the ships and the crews to do that mission. Your comment about, or your question about the recent article that talked about the potential hotline, perhaps, all I know is what I read in the paper, quite frankly. And so I don't have anything more to add on that. As I mentioned, in normal professional interaction, we interact with Iran on a daily basis. And so I saw the article, I read it, it was interesting, but that's all I know about that particular thing. And it's quite frankly, it's at a much higher level of our national leadership to make those kinds of decisions. Let's see. And then, will Iraq sometime have an opportunity to join? We welcome and look forward to the opportunity when Iraq will be able to join in the family of nations that are contributing towards collective security. Their Navy is young and growing, and so we've spent an awful lot of time and effort in helping bring the Iraqi Navy to a point where they're capable of patrolling their own territorial waters and protecting those oil platforms. And so they have come a long way towards being capable of patrolling and protecting their own infrastructure. And we would welcome the opportunity for them to join in the group of like-minded people that I just talked about to do collective security. The question, pirates in Kenya, the French woman who was kidnapped, and how will the task force deal with that threat? This is an interesting problem in that was a crime ashore. It was a kidnapping, and so that's for local jurisdiction, and it's in fact inside of Kenyan territorial waters. That is also a Kenyan responsibility as well. But I think the key for me is that we have opportunities to know how to talk to each other when we need to, so that the first time you need to talk to someone shouldn't be on the day of a crisis. Let's see. There was another question here about the Strait of Hormuz, the potential threat that Iran might want to shut it down, or they threaten, and we have the means or the resources. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide, and through it flow hundreds of ships, to include dozens of ships with liquid natural gas, chemicals, and also oil. And so sea lines of communication is the term that we use in the military or in the Navy. And sea lines of communication are the lifeblood of nations, and they're the reason that we have navies. So it is something that we watch very carefully. It took us a long time to figure out exactly what happened with the M-Star, the unsuccessful terrorist attack on M-Star. We had to really think and work hard to piece that all together. And it struck me with the M-Star, the reason you have crime cameras outside a bank is because that's where money is, and bank robbers try to rob banks, right? That's why there's a camera there. And we collectively lack the equivalent of a crime camera focused and staring on these really critical choke points. Bab el-Mandeb, the Suez Canal Authority in Egypt is a very competent and capable and professional force, and so but the Strait of Hormuz is a key choke point that we keep a very close eye on. The question about the missing funds in Iraq, I'm just a sailor. I have no idea what that, it's bad, I'm sure, but I have no idea what the answer to that is. And some things, when I just don't know, I'll just blurt out, I don't know. And then the question about the friction between the United States and Pakistan with this, the recent, you know, interestingly, last week, Pakistan took command of CTF-151, as a matter of fact. So there's a Pakistani naval officer that is currently in command of CTF-151. And we conducted operations at sea. And so I don't want to overstress this, but there are still opportunities that, as I said, sailors have unusual advantages in terms of being able to work together. And it's a difficult world that we live in, and some very challenging kinds of issues that we work out. But I'll tell you what, this goes back to the building trust and building confidence and being willing to work together towards a common good. So my focus is I want to carve out the areas where we have interests that overlap, and I want to exploit that and build an area where we all agree this is worth our time and effort, this is worth working together. And then there's a whole lot of stuff out there in a lot of other ways that I can't fix and I don't try to control. I'm not a diplomat, I'm just a sailor, but I know that you know, no one can do this by themselves. No Navy is so big that it can do it all by itself. No Navy is so small that they can't make a difference for good. So I think that's the way I would probably handle that. Final shots for any re-attack questions. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Admiral. That was a superb presentation. I think it was quite quick that you actually did it in half an hour. Sir, I just want to ask you a similar question I asked you before. Sir, first of all, I'd like to applaud the coalition forces plus the Bahrain Navy that's sitting right beside me, sir, for doing all the stuff they've been doing, the operations in CT-151 plus CT-150. My question goes out to the actual maritime role that we play out there, making everything safe for the oil tankers, the merchant ships, and all of the above. The question comes down to, as I see it, sir, with all due respect, sir, I see it as a football game going on. It's like the coalition forces is a team which is not going to win, yet they're paying a lot of money where it comes to you know, financing ourselves to actually be out there and try to stop piracy as much as we can. And then I see the other team, which is the Somali people, and others involved, I guess, playing this football game, and they know they're going to win this. Question comes down to the politicians, sir. The actual money, the ransoms that we pay off, I think we start ignoring them because all of these repercussions reach down to places where we do not want. So I would say even to Bahrain, our country does get affected by all these ransoms that get paid off. Coalition, very good, but even the terrorists have their own coalition partners and stuff. So all this does affect each and every country in the Middle East. That's basically it, sir.
I agree with your thesis that it affects all of us. You know, the one thing that, before I took this job, I had assumed that the piracy issue would basically create a situation where the economics of the problem would drive the solution. In other words, it would make such an impact on trade and so forth that there would be a willingness to have people work together because of the economics. But what I've discovered, and it depends on which study that you read, but the impact to the global economy of piracy is somewhere on the order between $8 and $12 billion is the figure that I've seen in different studies. When you think of a $75 trillion world GDP, $8 billion, $12 billion sounds like a lot of money, but it's not much in the total world GDP. And piracy has not changed the price of bread, the price of rice, the price of fuel. So it's a horrible thing for the sailors that are impacted by it, and it is something that we as civilized, you know, if you think of the worst case scenario, then this piracy business becomes a virus where young men around the world in ungoverned spaces now take it upon themselves to take a rocket-propelled grenade in a skiff and go try to get $1 million. And that would be something, and you see some of that. There's some activity on the west coast of Africa. So the reason societies function is because people stop at stoplights and stop signs and obey certain rules. And once that international standard starts to unravel, then there's a potential for it to get worse. So right now, this is an economy of force. There is so much other stuff going on in the world that it has not gotten the traction in the leadership circles that I'm familiar with to do something more. And I respect that. I'm a very big believer in the civilian rule of the military, and we know how to conduct a mission, and when we're tasked to do it, we will. So we're maintaining what I would refer to as an economy of force. I'm not putting everything that I have in my fleet against this problem, but I'm putting the appropriate amount of the ships and patrol that I can. And it's, as I said, it's not the solution is not a military one, quite frankly, but there's a military piece to it, and it's a mosaic. It's a lot of people around the world working together to do this. So both the rule of law in Somalia and the legal finish, and then the things that I influence with the maritime industry and with the military patrolling piece, we're doing okay, but the pirates are they have a business model. Over $230 million of ransom money has gone into Somalia. And so it's not a good situation. I advocate using some of the techniques and lessons that we've learned from the war on terror, follow the money, do the network analysis, and really hone down on the people that are responsible for this business practice of piracy. But one of the problems is these ransoms are paid in cash, and following cash is a lot harder than following electronic distribution of money. So I'm with you, I agree, but it's a difficult problem that we're going to continue to work to blunt. I'm not so bold or vain to say that we're going to solve it anytime soon. I appreciate very much the opportunity to spend some time with you here today. Thank you for your time.
Again, I want to thank Admiral Fox and his staff for making themselves available today. That was a very rich and informative presentation and a very candid set of answers to some tough questions. I just wanted to make two kind of general announcements. One, if this is your first time here or you didn't give us advance notice, if you could leave your business card or contact information with Eleanor Pitt in the back there or the receptionist, that would be wonderful. It would allow us to place you in our database and send invitations to future events that you might find interesting to attend. Secondly, over on the table here on my right, to your left, are some of the publications that the Institute distributes or creates and distributes that you might find of interest. All of them are for sale at either by contacting the reception desk or going to our website, IISS.org. So with that, I'll like to close this forum and again thank Vice-Admiral Fox and his staff for a very informative talk today. Thank you.
May I ask one question?
Oh, yes, please.
Can you update us about the seminars within the Manama Dialogue Framework, which you are working next year? Any information, any new information about this?
Well, Mark may have more to add to this, but we're in the process of organizing a series of what we're calling Sherpa meetings, and we haven't established a precise order for those yet, but we'll be getting that information out soon. Mark, do you want to add to that?
No, we'll be contacting all of the embassies in the next couple of weeks, I think, to give you details on who will be invited and when the meetings will be.
Because time is running, everything good. So
Time always keeps on running. We'll try to keep up with it.
Okay, so if we could all give Admiral Fox one last round of applause. Thank you.